I don't think this worked.
Hi, welcome back to Rabbit Hole History, where each week for 6 weeks I dive into a historical topic that I'm interested in. After an emergency hiatus, I am back with Season 2 of Rabbit Hole History, where I focus on ancient Europe. If you've been following along Season 2 so far, I've been covering topics that surround ancient Europe, such as Stonehenge, the Druids, the bog bodies, anything that I find kind of interesting and loosely connects to around the same time period. You can also check out my Season 1 on ancient Greece. But today we are getting up to one of my favorite parts about the season, which is cooking a recipe from the time period or about then. And of course, I have found another cheese recipe. There's drama, there's intensity. I had to make it twice. So without further ado, let's just jump right back into it. Welcome back to Rabbit Hole History. My main source of inspiration for this video comes from the English Heritage YouTube channel. They have a great video documenting the process of prehistoric cheese making and how they came to find out that ancient people were making cheese. They were able to find actual milk fats embedded in this ancient clay pottery. They explained also how to make cheese, which really only takes 2 core ingredients, milk and something to curdle it with. But Dr. Penny Bickle has a PhD and knew what she was doing. So let me just show you what happened when I tried to do this. I started off with a half gallon of whole milk and a little packet of rennet. Rennet is like a little packet tablet of citric acid that I had to dissolve, and that would coagulate the whole milk. After I dissolved the rennet tablet in a little bit of water, I just started heating up the milk constantly on whatever medium-low heat. That seemed to be all there was to it. I figured I would just heat up the milk, and while I did that and didn't stir it, I unfolded my little cheesecloth. Set it over the bowl where I would collect my curds. Then I added in my rennet and I gave it a little stir around. I lowered the heat to keep it from burning, or so I thought, and continued to stir it constantly once the rennet was added. Then I just kind of let it sit and do its thing, just like Dr. Penny Bickle did, or apparently did, and it eventually started to bubble up and kind of foam over like this, so I assumed that it was kind of done. I let it sit to collect the curds a little bit more, and then I decided I was going to pour it over the cheesecloth and see what I collected so that I could strain the curds from the whey.
I don't think this worked.
And that was attempt number 1 at me trying to make prehistoric cheese. I can kind of trace my steps back and see what I did wrong, and I think it mostly just comes to do with an overconfidence in my ability to make cheese when I've never made it before, and following a video that had no recipe, measurements, or time period to wait and let things sit and just do their thing. So I finally found success through In the Kitchen with Matt. Matt had a recipe that I thought was somewhat similar to the original prehistoric recipe I was trying to follow. He just made a ball of mozzarella cheese out of whole milk and vinegar. And he had real measurements that I thought were a little bit easier to follow. So I started again with a half gallon of whole milk. I was unable to find unpasteurized, so it's just regular pasteurized milk, and a little bit of just plain distilled white vinegar. I added the whole milk to the pot and I just put it on the stove again. Except this time I had measurements. I knew that I had to heat the milk until about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And at that point I added 7 tablespoons of the white vinegar, and you can already see it's starting to react to the heated milk. It's already starting to kind of curdle up. And then after about 30 seconds, I let it sit for 5 minutes. Then I was able to separate the curds from the milk or the whey, and you can see here I was able to hold the curds in my hand and start forming them and squeezing all of the whey water left over out. I was very proud that I made it to this point actually, finally. There's a ton of this leftover whey, so you have to drain it out, but eventually you have a happy little ball. Next, you have to make sure that it's heated to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And I used the very prehistoric method of microwaving it for 30 seconds at a time until it reached that temperature. And eventually it was hot enough to stretch it back into its little ball. From there, I dipped it in a cold bowl of water. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, I had my final product. Here's my little ball of mozzarella. I don't know if it's the stretchiest or the cheesiest, and it tasted really creamy, but not bad for somebody who thought they could originally just follow a YouTube video with no instructions or measurements. And I ended up being able to take that whey liquid and I made ricotta cheese out of the leftovers. So that concludes my prehistoric cheese making journey. I hope you enjoyed it. I really liked learning how to make cheese. And when I do this kind of prehistoric ancient cooking or follow a recipe from thousands of years ago, or even just a method like that, just milk and a coagulant, it really gives me an appreciation for our ancestors who came up with this with no help from anybody, no resources or YouTube videos that they can consult. They were just on their own and passing recipes down by word. And the fact that somebody just either discovered or invented this cheese making process all those years ago, it's really fascinating. I mean, we've been doing it this way for thousands and thousands of years, and it had to start somewhere, so it's just really cool to think about and put yourself back in that time. And so that's where we're going to pause the rabbit hole dive for this week. I really hope you enjoyed this video. It was really fun to get back into it, especially after such a long pause. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we'll see you next week.